You know that feeling when you snag a cheap gaming desktop off a clearance rack, only to discover it stalls the moment you load a modern title? I've seen that regret too often, and it makes me pause before I click add to cart. That hesitation is real, especially when you're trying to balance performance, desk space, and a price tag that doesn't break the bank. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon, and I'm going to walk through whether the HP 27-inch all-in-one actually lives up to the promise of being a smarter buy. First off, the biggest draw here is the all-in-one form factor. No tower, no tangled mess of cables, just a sleek 27-inch screen that houses everything you need. For anyone who's tired of hunting for space behind a bulky tower, this feels like a breath of fresh air. The 27-inch Full HD panel isn't 4K, but the pixel density is enough for crisp text and decent color accuracy when you're gaming, streaming, or working on spreadsheets. I set it up on a standard home office desk, plugged the power cord, and it was ready in under a minute. No assembly required, no separate monitor purchase, no mounting brackets. Performance-wise, the Ryzen 7 7730U paired with 32GB of RAM and a 1TB SSD is the sweet spot for most mid-range gamers and power users. The Useries processor is a mobile chip, meaning it's designed for efficiency rather than raw desktop horsepower, but the extra cores and the high clock speeds still give you smooth frame rates in titles like Fortnite and Valorant at 1080p on medium settings. When I switched to a more demanding game like The Witcher 3, the frame rate dipped into the mid-40s, which is still playable if you're okay with turning down some visual effects. The integrated Radeon graphics aren't a substitute for a dedicated GPU, but they're a far cry from the integrated graphics you'd find on a cheap laptop. For anyone whose gaming sessions are more about competitive shooters or indie titles, this setup feels surprisingly capable. What really separates this machine from the budget all-in-ones is the storage speed. A 1TB solid-state drive that's 15 faster than a traditional hard drive translates into practically zero load times for Windows 11, apps, and games. I loaded a fresh copy of Apex Legends and was in the matchmaking lobby within seconds, something I've never experienced with a spinning drive. That SSD also gives you room for a decent library of games, work files, and media without constantly juggling what stays and what goes. Now, let's talk about the practical downsides. The most glaring trade-off is the graphics capability. If you're a serious AAA gamer who wants ultra settings at 144 Hz, you'll feel the limits of the integrated Radeon graphics pretty quickly. The machine also lacks a dedicated graphics card slot, so upgrading isn't an option. What you get is what you get for the life of the unit. Another point that caught me off guard is the lack of a high refresh display. The panel is capped at 60 Hz, which is fine for most everyday tasks but can feel a little sluggish for fast-paced shooters where every millisecond counts. Thermal performance is worth mentioning, too. Because the CPU and GPU are tucked inside a slim chassis, the fan can become audible under sustained loads. In a typical gaming session lasting an hour, the noise rose to a low hum that was noticeable but not distracting. If you plan to push the system with long-duration rendering or intense gaming marathons, you might notice the fan kicking up a notch. For most users who blend work, streaming, and occasional gaming, it stays within an acceptable range. Who should buy this? If you're a creator-type professional who needs a clean desktop, fast storage, and enough horsepower to edit 1080p video, stream, and run design software, this HP all-in-one checks a lot of boxes. The 32GB of RAM means you can have multiple applications open: Photoshop, Chrome tabs, a music player without feeling the slowdown that cheap machines exhibit. The integrated graphics also handle light 3D work, so a freelance animator could use it for preliminary builds before moving to a more powerful workstation. It's also a solid pick for families or students who want a single device for schoolwork, media consumption, and the occasional gaming session. The built-in webcam, microphones, and speakers are decent enough for Zoom classes and video calls, eliminating the need for external peripherals. The Windows 11 experience feels polished, and the Connect and Collaborate features that HP highlights actually work. Sharing screens across a home network, pairing with a wireless mouse, and using the HP Command Center to tweak performance are all straightforward. On the flip side, you should skip this if you're chasing 4K gaming at high refresh rates, or if you need a machine that can handle the latest AAA titles on ultra settings for extended periods. The lack of a dedicated GPU and a 60Hz panel will become bottlenecks the moment you try to push past medium settings. Likewise, if you're an enthusiast who loves to tinker, the all-in-one design means you won't have the freedom to swap out